Hi, I'm Lavinia Butler, and welcome to Luvricand Company. Today we're talking about the Bellmead Plantation in Nashville and slavery and when life on the Bellmead Plantation, which is really something that we don't hear much about. So we're going to talk about it today on Luvricand Company. And we all know the plantation was formed was built in 1806 here in Nashville. And to talk about it today is the Education Director of the Bellmead Plantation, Beth Cooper. Beth, glad to have you on Luvricand Company.
It's good to be here.
Yes. Well, now, it is so exciting to me to talk about this, as you probably know, because I've talked to you and told you that I have a great-grandmother who was raised on the Bellmead Plantation. So it's so exciting to me to go back and walk the walk on the plantation. Let's talk about the plantation, when it was formed or started, and how it really started in 1806.
Okay. That was John Harding was the first generation to own the farm. He purchased it in 1806, about the time that he married his wife Susanna, and they brought with them 3 enslaved people. Patrick worked the land, Dicey was the cook, and Ben was a skilled blacksmith.
And those were the first 3 slaves that they brought with them?
Yes,
okay.
So the 5 of them started the farm, and there was already a log cabin on the site. That's what they moved into, and then they expanded. And if you visit us today, you can see that original cabin. Oh. So that's where the Harding family lived.
That original cabin from 1806 is still there?
It is.
Oh, wow. Now, that's fantastic.
It is.
Oh, that's the one that I toured that was over on the end that's closer to Harding Road.
Yes.
Now, didn't you tell me that was because people used to come off the Natchez Trace or something?
The Natchez Trace was a major trade route from Natchez, Mississippi, all the way up to Nashville. So the house was actually originally situated on the Natchez Trace so that it was part of that trade route. So they saw a lot of interesting things walking up and down the trace.
That cabin, that 1806 cabin that is still on the plantation today, you talking about, it is wonderful to see that huge, large fireplace.
Oh, yeah.
Which was where you said they did everything.
Done. Yes. So Dicey and Susanna Harding probably worked together in that room, doing laundry, dipping candles, dyeing clothing, cooking all 3 meals during the day. And that's one of the reasons the hearth is so big. They had to do all of that constantly all day long. So a lot of activity in that room. Wow.
It is. It's amazing. And to have something that historic here in Nashville.
Yeah, yeah.
And now the plantation, it grew, of course.
Of course.
Because, I was looking at the Tennessee slave population as reported in the 1860s. So it grew up to 1860. They had, by the time Civil War broke out, they had
136 people enslaved on the farm in 1860, and at that time it was John Harding's son, William Giles Harding, running the farm, and the mansion had been completed in 1853, so it was a fairly new, big house on the plantation as well.
So the mansion that is there now, the Bellmead Mansion, was built in 1853?
Yes.
Okay, and of course all slave labor.
Yes, if you look at the stone pillars, they're limestone. They're carved right out of the plantation property because limestone is pretty easily found here. And it's just massive. That's what I usually talk to people about on the front porch is imagine not having machines, not having any sort of trucks or anything to actually carve them out, and they're just 2 massive blocks stacked to make 1 column. So it's amazing I have no idea how they did that. But
that's what gets me. It's so amazing how these slaves, these Africans took, they used their hands to do, and their skills and their brains to really build the whole plantation, to make the houses, to
exactly.
the walls, farm the land. I mean, this
and run the trades.
Right. They were the plantation.
They were. I mean, 136 people, 59 of them were under the age of 10. So there were quite a few kids on the farm.
59 were under the age of 10? Wow.
And the rest of them, the men and women, were working the land. There was the blacksmith shop, a grist mill that ground flour, sawmill that cut lumber, the horse industry. They were raising and producing thoroughbred horses. So most of the men on the property were probably working in that industry. So there were a lot of things going on the farm.
Now let's talk about the thoroughbred industry. Now, when did Bob? Now, I have the picture you have here. Now, Eric, come on over to camera 3. Let me see this. This is Robert Green. No, yeah, you know, just if he could, you know, put on camera 3 now, and so so people can see Robert Greene. But Robert Greene was the Harding family slave headmaster. Well, not headmaster of the schools, but the head hostler. What is a head hostler? Tell us what that is.
He was basically the manager of the horse industry at Belmead. So all of the grooms and the trainers and the people that worked with the horses really worked for Robert Greene, and then he reported to William Giles Harding.
Oh, okay. So he was. Oh, you said all of the men and the women too? Just the men?
Just the people working with the horses.
Just the horses.
And I'm not sure if there were women. There may have been, but probably mostly men.
Just the men who worked with the horses. Now, Bob Greene was the head hostler who was over so Belmead had thoroughbred horses that the slaves raised.
They did, and they had an auction every year. This was mostly after the Civil War when the slaves were freed. A lot of them continued to work with the horses. Bob Greene was in charge really of the auction every year, taking the horses out, and everyone asked his opinion because he was the best knowledge of horses. He could tell you as soon as a horse was born if he was going to be a famous racehorse.
Oh,
so when these yearling horses, these year-old horses,
wouldn't the Kentucky Derby love to have him?
Exactly. When they're auctioning them, people came from all over the world, and the first questions were always asked of Robert Greene, what he thought, what was the best horse to purchase that day.
So the owners, the plantation owners, would ask Bob Greene, and this is a picture of Bob Greene, and he lived to be about 76
in his 70s, yeah,
almost 80.
We're not exactly sure of when he was born, so we can't exactly say, you know, how old he was when he died. But most of his life he was spent at Belmead.
Wow, this is something I was trying to get that. And the horse industry. I like this picture that you have at the bottom, the back.
This one?
Yes.
And that's Robert Greene again.
Of Robert Greene. Now these are paintings that are for sale at Belmead. A picture of Robert Greene with one of the thoroughbred horses.
Bonnie Scotland, which is probably the most famous thoroughbred horse other than Iroquois, the world famous racehorse that we had. But most of the Kentucky Derby winners to this day are direct descendants of that horse, Bonnie Scotland.
Of this horse, Bonnie Scotland, raised by Robert Greene. Wow. At the Belmead Plantation. Most of the Kentucky Derby winners?
Yes, to this day, most of the famous horses, even horses like Seabiscuit, can trace their lineage back to Belmead horses. I'm not sure specifically about this one, but most of them come from this horse.
Even Seabiscuit traces their heritage back to the Belmead Plantation, horses raised by the slaves. Isn't that something?
Yeah.
It is amazing. And Robert Greene, if you can do a close-up picture, this is the man who who knew all about horses. That you say, Beth, when the horses first came out, Robert could tell you when they were first born that this was a thoroughbred. Wow.
Exactly, and you can see, and that's what I like about that picture, is he looks like he's in charge. He's got that kind of boastful look about him. That's one of my favorite pictures.
He does. He looks like authority.
Yeah.
He does. Wonderful. This is such wonderful information about Belmead. I'm so glad. Now, since a lot of the men worked the stables and so forth, and then there was the carriage house there were the drivers and everything to deal with the stables and horses. That was Bob Greene's territory. Now, then what about the gardens? Well, of course, there were gardeners and things. Then there was the cooks.
And the people that worked in the house. They probably had 10 or 11 slaves working inside the house, which was cooking and cleaning, decorating for parties, taking care of the guests. All of those things were the domain of the house workers.
And the main person in charge of the house on the Belmead Plantation was?
Susanna Carter.
Susanna Carter. Now, she was named after the Harding's family wife. Did her name was Susanna?
It's really just a coincidence. They're kind of spelled differently, but yes, she came to Belmead as a wedding present, which in slavery is very common, especially as part of a dowry for a bride. So Elizabeth Harding, or Elizabeth McGavick, which she was before she married, when she married William Giles Harding in 1840, Susanna McGavick came with her at that time. Okay. And so it was from that point until her death, really, that she was was in charge of the household staff. And she married a man named Ike Carter while she was still a slave, so then she became Susanna Carter.
Oh, she was Susanna McGavock, took on the slave, Elizabeth McGavock, from the McGavocks, from McGavock Pike here in Nashville, and all from the McGavock.
Actually from Carnton Plantation, that's where Elizabeth McGavock grew up, and that's where she was before they came to Belmead. Very strong connection there.
And so it's amazing how, so from the McGavock family from the Carnton Plantation in Franklin, who married into the Harding
at Belmead,
Belmead Plantation, and she brought Susanna with her as a wedding present. And Susanna was the main head housekeeper and the cook, and took care of the the mansion and all of the
And the interesting thing about Susanna is that she was actually born free. She had two sisters, mother and father. She was born free, but her father took a trip down south on business, put her under the care of the McGavock family to watch while he was away, and he ended up dying of a disease while he was down there. And it was at that point that she was enslaved then. So she is one of the few slaves that knew how to read and write, and was very much better educated because she was educated as a free person.
Isn't that amazing, Beth, that she was started out free, and she was kept in the care, and all of a sudden he died, and she became a slave.
And that's one of the many stories
Isn't that something?
Of that time.
The stories and the history is so rich, history at that plantation, that Nashville really doesn't realize it, I think.
No, yeah. I know. We get so many visitors from around the world, but we get very few of our visitors from the local area. I meet so many people that say, you know, I keep meaning to go out there, but I've never been, and I've lived here 20 years, and I just hate to hear that, you know.
I have to raise my hand. I have to raise my hand to be one of the ones that say outside, if as a native Nashvilleian, fifth generation Nashvilleian, great-grandmother raised on the Belmead Plantation. I've been to the Belmead Plantation, perhaps I can count on probably two hands or less, how many times in my life, in my few decades of life, that I've been on the Belmead Plantation. And most of those times were for meetings or particular fundraising events. But not to just a tour until recently. And I had the pleasure of meeting you and meeting you there and touring the original 1806 slave quarters, cabin of the first Belmead Plantation house and so forth. But we didn't get to the mansion, and I don't think I've ever toured that. I have to admit, but that's on my soon-to-do list, because I'm so excited about learning about this rich history at the plantation that's there, and you know, and walking and tracing your steps from so many things that had happened there and so forth. And
I know for so many years we really concentrated on the inside of the mansion, and all the tours really only saw that. So the last couple of years we've really been spending time developing what the site is as a whole, 30 acres, 9 original historic structures. And the mansion, of course, is the biggest and perhaps the most beautiful of them, but there's so much going on there. We're starting to do living history to really try to do more at the cabin, at some other structures around the farm. So if you came and spent half a day, you would really be able to see so much more than if you had come even 5 years ago.
That's wonderful. Now you've also developed a curriculum, so to speak, for elementary and middle school. All up to high school?
We do high school tours. I brought some things from the trunk here, and the trunk is for elementary, middle school, but we do on-site tours for all ages that take them through the life of a slave at Belmead. And what we've kind of done is we've done a lot of research on slavery in general, and specifically in Middle Tennessee, and as specific as we can get it at Belmead. And from there we've created kind of character sketches of the kinds of people, their personalities living at Belmead. And so we let the children have kind of cards, and this is your name, and this is who you are, this is your interests, your likes, your friends, and your job on the farm. And they read that as we go along. We walk around the grounds, we talk about the slave quarters and the smokehouse, all the things that they would have been working with. And then we do take them through the mansion, but we do it from that perspective. And we say, you know, now think of this as if it was your job to clean this place and not be the one entertaining here. So that's what we do on site. And it's a really good program. It started about 3 years ago, and I'm very excited about that program.
Oh, that's just wonderful. Let's talk about some of these artifacts that you've brought here today that you it's just a mere smidgen, as they say.
Very small amount, yeah.
Of the artifacts, because the plantation is so rich with artifacts. I was just amazed to see some of the things that was just still there from centuries ago. It's amazing. Let's talk about some of the artifacts you have here.
A lot of these come from the trunk, which is a good supplement if you do them together, an on-site tour and a trunk program. They work really well together, but you can also just do the trunk if you're having busing issues or things like that schools today deal with. So they're just objects that bring that to life, like the rug beater here. Before vacuum cleaners, you had to really beat those rugs. So you can imagine.
So you took this and just have a rug and just
they usually
beat
rolled
the
it
rug
up
to get the dust out. And they would
roll it up to take it out of the house, and then they'd put it over the back porch, and then they would just beat the dust out of it, and then bring it back inside.
Bring it back in.
A lot more work than we're used to today.
Oh, and that's kind of hard with the swing on that.
Yeah, yeah. And then, of course, a washboard, which, we talk a lot about laundry. And not only did they have to do laundry, they had to make their own soap before they did the laundry.
Now,
so there was that.
Now, look, don't predate yourself too much, but this looks familiar to me.
Yeah.
Now, this is more of a modern day one that you use for traveling, talking. But this washboard, I remember using a washboard when I was a kid, hand down from generations.
Yeah.
But washing the clothes on, had to wash them on this, and dip them in the water to wring them out, so
it took a long time. They say it took about a week to do the laundry, and by the time you're done, there's more laundry to do. So
hanging them up on the clothesline.
Exactly, and then of course a brush to work with the horses. They had a lot of things they had to use to groom the horses. This is just one example. This, I know the kids really enjoy hearing about this. It's a hog scraper, actually.
A hog scraper.
Right. Part of harvesting the hogs or butchering them, you actually scrape the bristles off the hide with this.
Oh, wait a minute. This is after you've slaughtered.
Yes.
I need to ask.
I suppose you could do it before, but that wouldn't be very...
So after they slaughter the hogs, then they scrape the hairs and bristles. Okay.
And they actually use hog bristles for toothbrushes and hairbrushes and things like that. So they would scrape them and save them, of course.
And save them to make hairbrushes and so forth. How interesting.
Right.
Wow. Okay.
And then these items over here are more leisure time activities, because we do talk about slaves were people that were enslaved. So what did they create for themselves, for their culture, for their community? So that's really what these are, to kind of balance out what their jobs were on the farm.
This would have been made from a squash?
Any sort of gourd that can be dried, which a lot of things that the slaves made to use were made from gourds. It's a kalimba. Which is an African instrument, and African Americans adapted whatever they could find to make them here, but it was something they knew from Africa. So.
Yes, and used the squash gourd. Oh, this is
just one of the many instruments that they could make. And then, of course, gourds were also used for, this is a gourd dipper spoon, because a lot of times they were kind of left on their own to furnish their homes. So a lot of things were naturally used in carved wooden furniture, gourd dippers, those kinds of things. And this one actually has some decoration, which they may or may not have done.
Now, we used to play marbles. Oh, but they weren't made like this. What were these made out of?
Those are made out of clay. So the pouch is leather, and the marbles are made out of clay. Really easy to do. If you were a kid on the plantation, you would probably make a lot of marbles for yourself and your friends to play with. As
opposed to the different colored glass ones that we have today.
Yeah.
They were made out of clay, just different little size. We roll up different pieces of clay and let it dry hard and have marbles. Kids today just couldn't figure this out. I bet when you have the children out from the different schools and centers and so forth, that they're amazed of those kind of things.
Right, and it really makes the people come to life when you want to talk about the people and who they were. That's what I think is the most important about what we do at Belmead. So these kinds of things really help the kids imagine what it would have been like.
And you have so many books in your bookstore there on the gift shop there on the plantation land. The books, it's just so many books. This book was written by African American lady Velma Thomas from Atlanta. She's created and curates the Black Holocaust exhibit and stuff there. She wrote this book, which is fascinating, how called Lest We Forget, the passage from Africa to slavery and emancipation.
It's a great book because she takes primary documents, which are the letters, the court papers, the things like that that relate to slavery, and recreates them in a three-dimensional way. It's almost like a pop-up book. So the kids especially love to look through this and feel the freedom papers and look at the ads from the newspaper for runaway slaves and really see those in the three-dimensional sense. That's what I love about that book.
And this book, From Slave Ship to Freedom Road, Freedom Road, I think about the Underground Railroad. And this book is fascinating. The illustrator, Julius Lester, was he?
He wrote the text, and Rod Brown did the paintings. And Julius Lester is a famous author on the topic of slavery. That To Be a Slave is a great juvenile book. He's written many others, but this I like especially because he takes those paintings and really describes what he's thinking about them, and puts together exercises for people to use their imagination when thinking about slavery and thinking about what these pictures mean.
It's fantastic. Just this page that I turned to that he has here was they took the sick and the dead and dropped them into the sea like empty wine barrels. You can just feel and seeing, you know, that picture that coincides with that, and how they had them sleeping and with chains on and laying flat on their backs and so forth, and some on the stomach. It's a good history, and I know you probably get so many people to come out during Black History Month, but people can come out anytime. Year-round.
Right, and this is what I always like to say, this is American history, you know, and that's what we're about at Belmead. We have 100 years of American history to talk about, 1806 to 1906, really. And slavery is a huge part of that, and it's a part of American history. So in every program that we do, our main focus is how this plantation relates to American history in all of those different decades. So it's important year-round, definitely.
And see, that's what's so nice about it. And you're doing so many wonderful things, and I applaud you for bringing this to life, the life on the plantation outside of the big house.
Right.
Because it seemed like that's where all the action was. I don't.
It is, really.
You've seen between the grist mill, the
sawmill,
the
blacksmith shop,
they
raised cattle and sheep and hogs.
And see, we didn't touch on that.
Yeah.
And so you had all of that there. The plantation land. If the plantation was the 30 acres that it was it 30 acres?
It's 30 acres today, but it was actually 5,000 acres in 1860, if you can imagine, a lot of land. The entire city of Belmead, when you drive around Belmead Boulevard and you take all those side roads, it doesn't look anything like it did 150 years ago, but it was all part of that
That's what I was getting ready to ask you. So if this was 1860, Belmead Plantation would be all of the so-called city of Belmead?
Yes, all of that and more, even into Bellevue, across the train tracks on the
other side. All the way
side.
up to Bellevue? Oh my gosh.
All of that.
So it would be where the Highway 100, Highway 70 split? All of that was the part of the plantation?
And part of the parks right down on Highway 100, part of that land was originally on the plantation, so all the way down there.
Part of Percy Warner Park?
Percy Warner Park, So it extended.
All the way up to Percy Warner Park?
All the way through there and across. Yeah, a lot of land.
That was a lot of land. So then there were graveyards under some of this land, wasn't it? Where horses were buried, and because if horses died, they buried them under land. So maybe some of these houses and places you have where the horses and things were. And people were buried at that time too, because you had to think about life, and then there was death,
and there was so much life there for 100 years.
So much for so long. So you have all of these houses and apartments and places now that's in that area that was once the plantation.
Yes.
Wow, that is amazing.
It's a lot. Yeah.
It's a lot. Gosh, this is such a wonderful, rich history of so much that was going on there. So it was the Harding. No, I was trying to get a chronological take on who was there first. The very first owner was
John
Harding, and he and his wife Susanna. They did not have any children.
They
came,
no.
Right?
They had just gotten married, so when they moved in, they were newlyweds.
And then go on, and then who?
They had three children. William Giles Harding was their only son, so he inherited the property in 1839.
Oh, okay.
And then he married his second wife, Elizabeth McGavick, in 1840.
Okay, keep going. Tell me. And then who? Okay, so that was the son, and he had two or three children?
He had three children, a son from his first wife and two daughters from his second wife.
Okay.
And his oldest daughter, Celine, ended up inheriting the property, and she married a man named Billy Jackson, Brigadier General William Hicks Jackson.
Oh.
Very long name. He was a general in the Confederate Cavalry. Later on, he was instrumental in the Centennial Exposition where they built the Parthenon.
Yes.
He was on the board to put that on, so he was very much part of the Nashville scene. So they ran the farm then until his death in 1903, and then his son ran it briefly, just about a couple months, when he died of typhoid fever in 1903 as well. So then it went to the daughter-in-law, and within 3 years was sold. So that was really the end of it. Three generations
that was about
mainly.
1907 or
1903 to 1906 was really when they were selling it off kind of piece by piece, land first, animals, all that.
Okay. Gosh, Beth, this is absolutely fantastic. I have enjoyed talking about this today, and you bringing this to life to Nashville. Well, thank you so much for appearing on Luvricand Company.
Thank you for having me.
And we want to tell everybody to go out to the Bellmead Plantation and take the extended tour. Just spend a day, have lunch in Martha's. Is it Martha's?
Martha's at the plantation.
Oh, Martha's food is fantastic. And just spend a day there. It's a wonderful tour and lunch. And thank you for watching Luvricand Company. We're on every Wednesday at 10 p.m., every Thursday at 4 p.m., and every Saturday morning at 9:30. Thank you. See you again next time.